The external world is not a container we drop into and stumble about within. It's not like the pot for a flower or for a plant, but it's much more like the soil and the sunlight for that plant. It is the material flow out of which that plant grows. A seed wouldn't sprout on its own. In a sense, the planet is its mother and the sun is its father. So the external world is the dynamic ground from which its figures like the plants and animals and humans sprout. Now, these inhabitants are intelligent to the extent that they are capable of exploring and exploiting this dynamic ground. Plants don't have brains because they don't move. So the nervous system is called forth by and calls forth the ability of movement. Intelligence requires a body that has the capacity to sense and move, that has sensory and motor capacities. It requires a body that is capable of sensing and moving, in other words, interacting with its environment, and by that interaction, it's capable of appropriating the intrinsic dynamics of that environment. So intelligence is not simply brain-based, it's not something that happens merely inside the head, but it involves the nervous system as well as the body that houses that nervous system, and also the environment, the physical, and in some cases the social environment. These all participate in the process of intelligence, because intelligence emerges out of the interaction that the organism enacts with its environment. This is in fact well demonstrated in robotic science and in artificial intelligence research, where designing and engineering efficient and smoothly functioning robots that are capable of an extended repertoire of behavior turns out to be virtually impossible when their behavior is internally specified in a top-down control mechanism. Intelligent behavior cannot be pre-programmed in control mechanisms or in algorithms, because the result will be a very clumsy and costly robot, a robot that is overly circumspect and energy consuming. In other words, in robotic engineering, a truly intelligent behavior is achieved when the central controller of the robot is coupled with the intrinsic order and capacities of its morphology, its body, and also the intrinsic order present in its environment, when these different scales of behavior are coupled together, and so there is not a central control that drives every action of the robot, but it involves also its bodily capacities and the order inherent or present in its environment. A more and more important design principle in robotic engineering and embodied artificial intelligence is that control shouldn't be centralized, but it should be rather distributed, where it relies on the intrinsic capacities of the morphology and the bodily shape and organization of the robot, and also the order that is present in the environment. So where behavior will emerge out of the interaction of the robot and its environment, out of the interaction of these different scales of organization, of its central controlling mechanism with its bodily capacities and the environmental structures, together will yield the intelligent behavior. Intelligence, then, is not inside, but rather outside, inside out. It's an interactional phenomenon. For example, when I walk, it's not my brain that controls that action, but control is partly taken over by the material properties of my body, like elasticity in my legs, and also the material properties or physical laws that are present in the environment, like gravity. So my knee, when my leg impacts the ground, performs small adaptive movements without neural control. So in walking, I rely on the material properties like elasticity of my musculoskeletal system, and also I don't use my muscles in my lower leg before placing my foot on the ground, because gravity does that job for me, to use the words of Rolf Pfeiffer. So in this way we exploit all kinds of structures, bodily as well as environmental structures or physical laws like gravity and friction, or we exploit the electromagnetic force for seeing. In the same way we exploit sound propagation and vibration for hearing and listening and talking. Intelligence, I would say, measures the capacity to exploit available resources. Resources that can be nutritional, energetic, informational, or even social and cultural, pecuniary. in case of humans. And consequently, the more complex and refined the sensory motor capacities of an organism, that is, its capacity to affect and be affected by the distinctions, by the objects that it teases out of its environment by structural coupling with it, the more intelligent that organism becomes. So once again, intelligence emerges as the organism interacts with its environment, and by that interaction taps into and appropriates external resources for personal use. And the more the sensory motor capacities, the bodily capacities, its ability to affect and be affected extends, the more intelligent that organism becomes, the more it becomes able to harness the intrinsic dynamics of the material world. And this is the way, in a sense, that intelligence spirals through the layers, the different layers and different scales of material formations. And of course, in case of humans, the external resources we tap into is not restricted to physical laws, but it also involves social, cultural, and symbolic resources as well. I participate in configurations that take shape on their own accord. I am not the author of my actions. Rather, I am the story that unfolds through those actions. I am a story that involves a multiplicity of characters that are historical, and characters that are physical as well as chemical, or animate as well as inanimate, and subpersonal as well as impersonal. Cups and spoons, books and norms, hormones and cells, genes and proteins, rooms and chairs, doors and cells. These things all participate in weaving the story that I am. In effect, my distinct character is brought forth through the partnership of all these various beings, various material formations.